Well, I mean, let's.
Welcome to the Radio Horror Show as we are talking about Lee Cronin's The Mummy, the new film from Blumhouse Studios, and also yeah, look at that t-shirt. Warner Brothers, The Mummy too, because it's a Warner Brothers film, which is kind of interesting. What did the hieroglyphs say on that?
Uh, I have no idea.
Okay. They're probably the same stuff written inside the bandages of the mummy. This was a rather unique and different kind of mummy movie. If you saw Lee Cronin's previous film, a couple to the what was it 3 years ago, Evil Dead Rise. There's definitely some elements of it in that. I had a chance to interview Lee Cronin thanks to Blumhouse and Warner Brothers on Radio Horror. We had him on the show last week, and he went into a lot of details behind his ideas of what the mummy movie should be, not giving away any plot spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet. But this is a rather different kind of mummy movie. I can't deny this is Evil Dead wrapped in bandages, but rather unique, different kind of a bandaged mummy movie. I'm glad it's not just the straight up like copy of the Brendan Fraser movies or the Boris Karloff films, but it's definitely also not what you're expecting, like in the um, later Universal Mummy movies, which is Karis. I think that was the character in the Ghost of the Mummy, The Mummy's Hand, The Curse of the Mummy, the four films that would follow. And of course, Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy as well. That's Clarice, not to be confused with Karis. They couldn't come up with anything original, I guess. But this was not the worst mummy movie I have ever seen, but it was definitely not the best mummy movie. It was a substitute of Egyptian archaeology for straight up massive amounts of gore and blood and just absolute, trying to be a terror filled film. Kudos to that. They try to make a horror movie of a mummy movie. Something not very done very often. Um, Over on the YouTube channel for here for Radio of Horror, and I'll put a link in the comments below. You can check out a movie called A Mummy Among Us, a 48-hour film project that I produced and wrote for the 48-hour film project in 2015, starring Sarah Michelle. And it's a hilarious take on a mummy movie for about 7 minutes. What'd you think of the mummy movie, Katie?
Uh, um, you mean Lee Cronin's Evil Dead, The Mummy? It is definitely a possession movie more than a mummy movie. Yes, there's kind of a curse sort of in it, but it's so disjointed that the story let's just say this, there's so many instances in the film where things happen with characters that I actually out loud threw up my hands. I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. um it's look, stuff happens in horror movies that are unbelievable. Stuff happens in horror movies that it's like there's no way this could happen unless it's in a horror movie. And then some stuff happens in horror films where it's like this is the dumbest people, these are the dumbest people I've ever witnessed in my life, and there's no way this would happen even a smidge in real life. A good chunk of what that last part I just said happened in Lee Cronin's The Mummy. It starts out in Cairo. If anyone is familiar with the story, uh, the beginning of the film, I'm not even really sure what happened with that because I'm still a little confused, even though some people have had their interpretations. And, maybe I need it spelled out to me because that didn't make much sense. But it comes to a family of four. The mom is pregnant, she is a nurse, they have a boy and girl, and the dad is a journalist, and that's why he's in Cairo. They've been there for about 8 months or so. I mean, all the kids acting is great. As far as the family connection, I did not feel the chemistry. So that was a little off when all of a sudden the little girl, who I believe is like 8 or 9 years old, is kidnapped. Goes is kidnapped by something. There's a dust storm, and she is gone for 8 years. We return to the family 8 years later. There's now an additional child because the mom has had that child, who is a precocious little girl, and she's awesome. The brother is now a teenager. Mom and dad still no chemistry, and also haven't looked like they've aged a bit in 8 years. That's one of the things with films when you do that progression. You got to do something with hair, with style, something. No one stays the exact same way in that amount of time. They find the daughter that went missing. Uh, they are advised that she's perfectly fine, and all they need to do is bring her home and keep her at home to be around family. That's the dumbest medical advice I've ever heard. That's some of the dumbest medical advice I've ever heard in a film, which makes it even more frustrating is that the mom is a nurse and she just goes along with that. No second opinion. At one point, there is a line, well, the doctor in Egypt said, that's it, one doctor. They went to one doctor in Egypt after their daughter had been found in a sarcophagus that she was in 8 years. One doctor in Egypt said, you don't need to do anything with her, just bring her home and that should be fine. That's so stupid. But then there's so many gross out moments that happen where this is a spoiler. At one point, when if people have issues with toes or have some stuff with some stuff with, I think let's just say this, I think Quentin Tarantino is really going to like this film. Wink. But there's a point where a significant amount of flesh is taken away from the child that has come back to live with them. Instead of taking her to the hospital, again, the mom, I think out of spite, decides to do it herself. There's just so many instances like that that I'm just like, I just cannot believe any of these things, especially when you're dealing with kids. If these are adults and it's like, it's up to them if they want to have that, stubbornness and defiance and all that stuff, fine. But when you have a film that has the majority of instances happening to children, other people will get involved, especially when there's stuff that happens in a giant setting, which I will give Lee Cronin credit, was one of the grossest scenes in a film that I have seen in quite some time. I'm not saying it's necessarily gory, it's just flat out gross. And that's what the majority of, I feel like, this film had. Um, did it have some great practical effects? Yes. Did it have some good CGI? Yes. Did it have some bad CGI? Yes. Was the production design or locations pretty cool? Yeah. Even though I guess they never did film in where it's supposed to be New Mexico or actually Egypt. I guess they only filmed in Spain and Ireland, which good for them. That surprised me. The performances, like I said, the two leads that play the mom and dad, no. No. They're just, I mean, and I don't think that's necessarily because of them. I think it's more the material. But there are some scenes where there's a lot of frustration about what happened that they never got out. There's also scenes that, again, where the mom is so stubborn, like, I'm going to take care of this, where girl, I mean, you also have two other kids. Like, I feel like you're like neglecting what's happening to them when you're trying to take care of this child who obviously needs more help than you can provide. I will say that the actresses that played Katie Cannon, who is the child who comes back, Natalie Grace, and Emily Mitchell, I thought they were both fantastic. I think that Veronica Falcone, who plays Abuelita, was amazing. I think she was one of the highlights of the film. And also May Calame, who plays Detective Dahlia Saki. I could tell her frustration was also kind of mirrored my frustration in the film regarding what things could happen. There was just a lot of scenes. I felt like the editing was all over the place, where the dad goes to professor to find out some things, and then they cut to another scene where he's in another scene, and then they come back to where it seems like it's almost the same day with the professor, and it's like, why couldn't you just found out all this information with the professor all in one day? It was just a lot. If people, there's some people that I know that liked Evil Dead Rise that did not like this film. There's some people that I know that did not like Evil Dead Rise that loved this film. I personally loved Evil Dead Rise. I thought that was great. I thought the story was more cohesive. This one, I just didn't believe, honestly, a lot of the family dynamics or again, the chemistry. Ugh. I do think the score was great. And the house where we find the family in that's supposed to be in New Mexico, that was awesome, especially with a few things going on inside the house. I loved how they sort of did this. But again, I just feel like this was sort of a mess that was just all over the place, that had different things coming out of the word work when, I don't know, again, when you're dealing with a child that's been missing for 8 years, I just think about like this, something that's going on in the news today regarding someone that's missing, that's a high profile celebrity's mother. They're looking at everything, and that's been going on for 3 months. This is something that was supposed to have happened 8 years ago, and I feel like nothing would have been overlooked. Every article of paper that this child had, any card that was sent, everything, the police would have looked at it first and then given it to the parents. And this is something that just to me didn't seem believable. And it's supposed to be in modern day, so it's not like this is something that was like, oh well, it's in the 80s, so they kind of dropped the ball on some things. No, I feel like this is just I don't know, just some bad script writing. I know there are other people who are going to disagree with that. Good for you. Good for you. This is my opinion. This is what I think. And again, if you're in it for the gore, great. Again, gross out moments. Be careful in certain theaters that you go to, because I've known at least 4 people who had to ask the theater that we're in to turn it down because it was so overblown with the sound that they left with headaches, and some people actually walked out because it was so bad. I blame that more on the theater than the film itself. But for me, this is a pass. Look, I know they've done the Universal uh, Werewolf, they've done The Bride, they've done The Invisible Man, which I think right now has been the only film that Universal that actually has come out right. The Mummy is not, and I have no expectations. I did not watch the trailer, so I didn't go into this knowing what was going to be happening. And I just feel like it was a miss. I think you should stick to Evil Dead films and maybe some of the other things. But for me, this wasn't the film that should have happened.
Is this Universal or Warner Brothers?
No, Universal monster movies with Frankenstein and this. Warner Brothers made this one, but the Universal monster movies is what Werewolf and Dracula and Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein and all that stuff.
We can only hope in 2 years we'll get a really, really good Universal Brendan Fraser mummy movie, but time will tell. Legacy stuff has been very hit or miss. For every Scrubs season 10 there is, or 9 if you retcon it, there has been The Force Awakens. So we will have to wait and see what happens. With this film, I like the fact that you mentioned the police would not have stopped and looked over everything. But the problem is that she disappeared, even though she is an American citizen, she disappeared in Cairo. We would have to send like competent police detectives over there to help out their police force, and that police detective was not interested in helping an American family. And it wasn't until years later, when the woman was now in charge and the detective, that she was looking into this case a lot more thoroughly. And that just might have been like how they wrote around the cops just didn't do anything to help this family, and the fact
Oh,
that
and
they're
that,
in another country.
oh no, and I get that, but the thing is, even that the family hadn't looked at. I mean, when you get into, there's a situation where the dad goes into everything that was sent to him. There's a whole box full of stuff that wasn't even opened, that he didn't even look at. And I mean, even if you don't have the Cairo police doing that, someone would have looked at that and been like, look, I know you guys are grieving. I know you guys are beyond in an emotional state that I can't comprehend. Let us try and do some of this for you, like anything. But it was a time that, to me, that just didn't seem feasible, that at no shape and time that they would have like tried to look through everything. And I get it. they were already feeling pressure on them, that they knew that this cop, it's like, oh, this is what happened. We don't really need to look because we know what the answer is. And you have the female police officer who obviously, no one was paying attention to, even though she was the only one who spoke both Egyptian and English to get this out. And but even her, it's not like she after, I mean, it was shut down. That was basically a cold case that was shut down. It wasn't until everything was like thrown into her face and then the dad called again that she got stuff going. I mean, it just was just again just all over the place. And I honestly, I just wish I felt like it just could have been better. There also was a scene where I felt like, they pushed the grossness and all that stuff, but I feel like there was a scene between the brother and sister that could have been implied grossness that they didn't push, that
Oh, you mean when
that
she
I
asks him
feel
to
like
come in
they
and help me
did.
undress?
And yeah, that I feel like they did in Evil Dead Rise in a kind of nasty way, and they didn't really push that in this, which I think could have been delivered a lot better. I just I don't know, the more it was just head scratching moments left and right. I mean, the whole thing, there's a funeral scene, everybody, that right there, there's some gross stuff in there, but there's also some, structural integrity of the house that is overlooked, and then that plays into that, which is crazy. But it's like I said, when you have stuff that kids do in front of strangers and in front of other people, that's you automatically, especially if you're in America, you already have a bullseye on you. Then it's like people are going to be asking questions, people are going to have other people coming to the house to ask questions. It's not just going to be like overlooked and stuff like that. And I don't know, I felt like this kind of made the audience seem like they were dumb and wouldn't think about those things. But like I said, the highlights I mentioned, go see it for the actresses who played Katie, the Abuelita, and the detective. Otherwise, yeah, I would say wait to see this at home.
I was I've been looking forward to this film for a while when I heard it was coming, and I wanted something just uniquely different. And I guess in a way we do get that. But when I realized that it was going to be so much more like The Evil Dead, I was worried it was going to be too much like The Evil Dead. And it's a rather interesting idea that we have this whole um what a demon trapped in a body and mummified, and like how they do the wrappings of a mummy that are very traditional. There's some cool shots of showing like how that's done in a very unique way, especially with regarding to like why does Katie look like the way she does. Yeah, being sun deprived and mummified would probably really mess up your looks, but it goes beyond that. And I don't want to give it away too much, but it was something I thought was unique to this story in doing that and doing some research into some mummifications. They're not just always wrapped up in like the gauze bandage that you think they are. And that added the layer to the just design of the creature, as you will, in this film. And kudos to that actress to be able to like hold that film, because the actress who plays Katie, the older
Natalie
version of
Grace.
Katie, Natalie Grace, has to really like go nuts with this film and do as much as she possibly can. I mean, she has the adult role actors in the movie like Jack Rayner and Laia Costa, but this really kind of was like putting it on a very young actress. I guess she can't be any older than the character herself. She definitely did not look that much older than the character herself, which would be about 18 years old or so. So physically demanding role with her and her stunt performer, obviously. You could probably do some research and find out Lee uses the same stunt performers in this as he did the Evil Dead film he made, because that had a lot of stunts in this. And this had the same kind of like spider, like just jittery stunts and everything. Um, and hats off to that stunt team. I just got done listening to an entire audiobook about the history of a stuntman who worked for Marvel Comics, and he was the original Spider-Man for Marvel for years, and just how much stunt performers have to put up with and do. In fact, he reinvented the airbag that people jump onto, and helped save so many people's necks and backs. To this today's total, he said he saved lives of 163 people with his reinvention of the airbag that
Oh,
stunt
that's
performers jump
great.
onto. Yeah. The wire work in this movie is pretty superb. You didn't tell it looked like it was wires. It definitely looked like the room was flipped and there was the on the wall just nuttiness. I definitely recommend watching this movie for its technical superiority. Will it be on the list of the horror movies of the year? More than likely. Um, it's definitely going to give Lee Cronin another job, that's for sure. So, atmosphere, it gave me a vibe, but story wise, it gave me like just lacking in any kind of vibe. So go check it out in theaters right now, or wait till it's streaming or on disc. I will be adding it to my vast Mummy collection. Um, and we'll have to see what Lee Cronin comes up with next. Hopefully, something different than just the Evil Dead tropes we've seen already from this film. Definitely recommend going to watch his movie A Hole in the Ground. That is a fantastic film as well. It's the first thing you really kind of stepped into as an independent film. Check out the rest of the videos here on the Radio Horror YouTube channel. Check out Katie over on hers and also her social media. Check out Radio Horror Sunday nights from 10 to 12. Or I also check out the link that I will put in the description below of A Mummy Among Us, my 48-hour film project from 10 years ago, where a mummy comes to Rhode Island and and experiences the 21st century in a rather unique and hilarious way. Thank you, everyone.